Today we have with us Suvojit Chattopadhyay. He is the head of Adam Smith International Africa. How was the MNREGA envisioned and what it was originally designed to do?
In simple terms, MNREGA is the right to work.
What was the definition of rural?
A strong leftist philosophy that came in, which was also supported and I think promoted by people like Sonia Gandhi.
Not talking about rights anymore. It's kind of transitioning from rights to duty.
They've just complicated the process so much more. The central government would contribute 90% of the budget of implementing the scheme, and the state would have to put in 10%. So that for MNREGA has now been changed to a 60-40, where the center will contribute 60%, the state will have to bring 40%. With this government, the other problem is
Data.
the total absence of data.
Even for GDP calculation, many economists have raised concern about the data accuracy.
We are not at that stage yet where technology can just be applied blindly, without safeguards.
I mean, what do you think of the opposition's role here?
If China could actually do this kind of suppression or whatever and still could develop, why India cannot develop? Again, like the burden is on you to prove you have the voting rights side.
Welcome, viewers. Today we have with us Suvojit Chattopadhyay. He is the head of Adam Smith International Africa. He featured with us in one of the previous episodes of Panchayati Raj, and we will give the description and the link, and you can have a look at that. So today we have in this episode, we will discuss about the much awaited and the recently passed bill of the VPG Ramji, that is Viksit Bharat Guarantee for Rozgar and Ajeevika Mission bill, which will replace the famous MNREGA, which is the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. And we will see in our episode that how do we see the future of it and how do we completely analyze it, maybe from a very critical lens, and how it impacts us on a day-to-day basis. So welcome, Suvojit, to this episode again. So happy to have you.
Thank you, Shovik. Thank you, Pratyay.
So the very first premise what we can start is maybe with the MNREGA. So maybe you could, for our viewers, give a glimpse that how was the MNREGA envisioned and what it was originally designed to do. And a lot of us, we know that it was a groundbreaking, policy which was incorporated in 2005. And then we can draw parallels with the new VPG Ramji bill.
Right. Okay. I think that's a good place to start. So MNREGA came into effect. It was through a constitutional amendment, and basically a law was passed, right? So in 2005, in simple terms, MNREGA is the right to work, and it created a justiciable right to be paid for work. Now, what was different about MNREGA at that time in 2005 was that, as opposed to other sort of cash for work programs, it was the rights-based element of this scheme, of the program, right? When it became a law, that was what was different. So basically, in terms of the details of the law itself, rural households, so this is for rural India at the beginning, rural households could demand up to 100 days of wage employment. And if they demanded wage employment, the government had the obligation to provide work, right? And if the government was not able to provide work within 15 days, you had to provide an unemployment allowance. Now, this was groundbreaking for its time because, as I said, of the legal obligation element that was worked into it. And before we start thinking that, why should the government provide employment, etc., it is important to remember that when the scheme was launched, it was limited to first 100 days of work, and second, it was, I think, initially the wage was also capped at around 100 rupees per day. When it was started, and of course over time the wage has inflated, etc. So what is important here is the fact that it is a safety net, right? It is a safety net for the most vulnerable of the people.
Yeah, so one of the thing
Who-
actually I was curious about this definition of Manrega. So there was a rural component in it, right?
That's
And based on rural, was there I mean, this is confusing to me. Maybe it's, in general, it's pretty well defined. Like, what was the definition of rural?
well, a rural area, right? So
Rural area.
definition of rural comes from the census, right? Which again, as you know, in India, the last census was done in 2011. And I'm sure if you do the census again, which has been long overdue, it'll probably redefine how much area can be now classified as rural. But there are definitions in the statistical, I guess, system
Okay.
of the country that define clearly what a rural area is, and it was meant for rural.
So it is a very clear defined thing, actually, right?
Yeah, very clearly.
So a person can migrate from rural to urban areas as well. But you are saying that if the person's residence is a rural, that means residence address corresponding to the Aadhaar card or
Correct.
whatever, then the person is defined as rural. That's a clear definition. There is no confusion
That
in
is
that, right?
What is important here is, one, the place of work is in rural areas, right? So that is
Okay.
where the work has to be performed. So if you're working on the field, if you're digging a pond, if you're working on a hillock, etc., right, those have to be in rural areas. And then second, to answer your question, the residence, the eligibility of the individual is defined through muster rolls that gram panchayats maintain. So gram panchayats have a list of families
Okay.
that are, so it does not matter. This is important because it does not matter if the person has migrated to a city, say Bombay, to go work as construction labor. If he comes back for a couple of months, let's say he has to be in the village for some reason, he can ask um, to be given work, right? And the state is legally obligated to provide him that. Yeah.
Okay. On the okay, that's pretty clear now. So the other the thing I wanted to just speak up from whatever you mentioned, the right component. I think that kind of is a distinctive feature of not only this particular scheme, but also there are a number of right-based laws, like right to education and right to food security as well, probably. So I think that was in 2005. It was UPA 1, right? And
That's right.
the entire philosophy of that particular government was to introduce this right-based policies, right? So that was kind of the fundamental aspect of it, right? So is it? I mean, now what we see for for the tenure of this government, right? So they are actually not talking about rights anymore. It's kind of transitioning from rights to duty. So rights of citizens from the duty of citizens. So is this the main distinctive feature of from this Manrega to the new one VVG Ramji bill, or how do you perceive it? Like, it's more philosophical probably, but yeah.
Sure. So I mean, if you'll allow me just maybe a minute on this whole rights-based philosophy, right, of
Sure.
the government. So the UPA government, that UPA one that came into power in 2004, had I think it's now quite widely recognized, sort of two distinctive um, impulses, right? So, and in today's terms, you can say two different engines that slightly were pulling in slightly different directions. Also, so one engine is the whole Manmohan Singh, Montek Singh Ahluwalia engine of economic growth and liberalization. And the other, especially in UPA 1, because the UPA 1 had support of the left parties, who at that time had, I think, about 60 plus seats in the Lok Sabha, which is their, I think, best ever performance.
Best ever,
right?
yeah.
So a strong kind of leftist philosophy that came in, which was also supported and I think promoted by people like Sonia Gandhi. So, which could therefore not be ignored by the Manmohan Singh government, right? And they started working on a series of rights. So they said, the liberalization has happened. the economy is booming, but there is a significant section of the society that is falling behind. Plus, rights, as Amartya Sen has written about, it forms the basis of citizenship and dignity, etc. So they worked on a series of rights. You've named some of them. So right to work, which was MNREGA, right to information, which is the landmark bill that brought about transparency, that came later. Right to education came later, and before UPA 2 left power in 2013 was the right to food security. The National Food Security Act came here, right? So in all of this, the philosophy was that citizens are right holders and they can demand certain things from the government. And the government is sort of should be legally bound to give them. There's lots of debate about whether just passing these rights makes a difference, or do you need other sort of guarantees or other economic opportunities really to follow through on these rights, etc. But yes, so NREGA is a great example of a rights based program. What has changed right now, and that's interesting. So in the VBG Ramji scheme, first of all, it's a sort of it's a perfect name to bait a certain section of the society. So in VBG Ramji, nominally they say they are guaranteeing 125 days of
that's an increase from 100 to
100 to 125.
Yeah.
But what they're also saying is that there are many things that they have changed, which we can get into, like within the details of the scheme, that changes the nature of the program from one where work can be demanded and has to be given as a matter of right to a far more bureaucratic sort of program where states and the center have to plan certain allocations. There are some ceilings and approvals that have been that have to be made, and then they've also shifted the balance of funding between the state and the center, all of which takes away, I think, the core component of where the state is obligated to provide work should the citizen demand it. They've just complicated the process so much more that it has become far more of a sort of a bureaucratic process with a series of administrative approvals required to actually be able to give that amount of work to the people.
Right. So it reminds me of this somewhat uncanny similarity with this, right now, what we are seeing in particular in West Bengal with this SIR exercise, right? So it's like everyone has a voting right, but the burden becomes a burden is on the citizen to prove that the citizen has voting rights. So it seems pretty similar there as well. Like the bureaucratic procedure is so involved now. Now the burden is, you have to claim your right we have to go through all these burdens. So it's kind of increasing the threshold. So is it some sort of a underneath there is basically an effort to basically undermine the entire program, or we cannot say right now, but maybe we have to go to the statistics 3 years down the line or something. But
exactly.
What do you think? What do you think?
Exactly. So I think one important thing to remember or to note here is that the change in the law and the introduction of VBG Ramji is in a sense a culmination of about 10 or 11 years of gradually weakening the NREGA or MNREGA program, right? So the MNREGA program was meant to be this people could turn up and get work. There would be social audits that were conducted by the people, organized by the panchayat to verify. And slowly it has moved to already a fairly difficult to access program for a certain section of the society, because of things like Aadhaar based biometric verification, among others, right? Like it is not an automatic guarantee, similar to what you're saying, right? Where on if in the past it was assumed that by default you had a right to work, or a right to vote. Now it is almost that you have to do certain things to establish your status as an eligible beneficiary, right, or an eligible citizen. And then that is a sort of a more, yeah, exactly, it's a sort of moral shift in the policy. So, and then over the years, the the most striking thing about this is, if you look at the state of the Indian economy and the fact that, what is it, 83 crore people are getting free food assistance, and yet in terms of Manrega numbers, like there are very few states that have hit an average of like 100 or anywhere close to 100 days of work per family, right? So most states in India are still in the sort of 40 to 60 days of work on average. So demand suppression is something that has been going on for a while, right? So people demand work, either work is not given, or there are various other obstacles that have been brought up to deny people work. Now, you've brought in some more administrative procedures, you have weakened the state finances by making them more dependent. They have to comply certain rules so that the center will give them money, etc. In a way, you're just further institutionalizing this whole thing of demand suppression and denial of work for those who actually manage to make the demand.
I think it is currently 90-10. I mean, the MNREGA was 90-10
Exactly.
allocation with center.
From the center.
Now
Yeah.
it's 60-40. Now we have
Yeah.
seen in other schemes, in such schemes that I think in West Bengal, even the MNREGA is stopped for the past 3 or 4 years. I understand the MNREGA budget was not coming to the state. So it also comes to, the power center. When center, there's a different regime and there's a different government in state. There is a clash. And now it will be even further, especially with states which has a different, like the opposition government from the center. And the allocation being 60-40 is I would say it's a heavy burden on states, which is like, I don't know how you feel about it, but the allocation has significantly changed. 40% big onus.
Just interrupting. So for the viewers, I think it's important to clear what the numbers mean actually, like 60-40, 90.
Sure. I can. I can do that. So we're saying that this is back in again during the UPA 1 time, the UPA 1, UPA 2 times, that the center had a set of what they call flagship social sector schemes, right? These are flagship centrally sponsored schemes, and MNREGA was one of them. In these schemes, the central government would contribute 90% of the budget of implementing the scheme, and the state would have to put in 10%. And for certain states like the hill states and in the northeast, even that 10% requirement was taken away. The center would finance 100% of the scheme, right? So that for MNREGA has now been changed to a 60-40, where the center will contribute 60%, the state will have to bring 40%. And so again, we have to look at, well, we cannot analyze this without talking about the intent of some of these changes, right? So we know that this comes against the backdrop of, as Shovik said, the center, picking out opposition party ruled states and then trying to kind of really cripple how they work, right? So you can sort of see that they have not given any money to West Bengal for the last 3 years. There are arrears of, I think, over 7,000 crores in West Bengal. We know that state government finances are quite weak in this country, right? The state governments are not in great shape. You ask them to basically put up 40% of the money required for MNREGA, you're basically disincentivizing the state from implementing the scheme properly, because they just don't have the money. Right? They just don't have the money. And earlier, and the center, on the other hand, is, I suppose, accusing the states or saying that the states are indiscriminately generating demand for MNREGA because they know that they don't have to bear the burden. Now, if you said that about any other scheme, one can even understand that or have a discussion about it. But in the case of MNREGA, like, even to have the notion that someone is indiscriminately generating demand is misplaced, because you have to do physical labor to get that sort of 150 or 170 rupees
Yeah.
of daily wage, which one would assume only those who really need it will come and be ready to do that work, right? So in the case of Manrega, like, it is not even fair to say that there is some perverse incentive which is inflating demand, because only those who really need it are doing Manrega anyway.
So in some sense, like it's the reverse federalism. I mean, it's like states do not have a lot of means to get, like, collect revenues. For example, they have to depend on it. State cannot impose, like, unlike the United States, where each state has a right to do income taxes and other kind of things. Here, state has to depend on probably the only, like, GST, half of the GST now. That's even like due. But now the responsibility is more onto the states, right? So even like states which are like very dense, such as West Bengal, for example, and it becomes very hard for the state government. And also, it's kind of a politically. I mean, states will have some disadvantage politically, because if they cannot implement them, then there will be like unemployment shooting up, and there would be like I mean, employment is a big factor, in fact, like, political scenario, right? So basically, doing this to like implementing this, they would also probably can potentially ensure that there is a political gain to make out of this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the UPA government, and this is obviously now, what, 15, 16 years back, in 2008 and 9, won a re-election on the basis of like rural votes, and on the basis of the success of schemes such as the NREGA, right? Because what it did, and what it did also during COVID, what it demonstrated was that sort of safety net keeps a level of rural consumption demand going in the economy, which this government is basically not pursuing. I mean, this government, this is maybe a separate discussion, but the economic principle or philosophy of this government is a supply driven one, right? So where it's saying that we will invest in large infrastructure programs, we'll build roads, etc., and it's a kind of injecting public investment into the country, and then saying that there'll be employment created out, or economic activity created out of that, which will lead to progress. What it is not doing, and again, it's a matter of debate. What it is not doing is to increase the purchasing power of people by putting money in the hands of the people, right? So through schemes like NREGA, which is what it is designed to do. So the poorest of the people, they will not reach destitution because they will have enough money to buy basic essentials, etc. Is something that this government is not interested, does not seem interested in. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just a follow-up question to that. I mean, recently West Bengal government has launched this Jubo Sathi program, right? So, is it like some sort of it's unconditional cash transfer? I'm not sure if you're super aware of this, but it's kind of an unconditional.
I'm not actually. Yeah.
Okay, so it's an unconditional cash transfer to basically the unemployed youth, right? So it's not really giving them jobs or anything, but just from the demand side, it will give some cash, direct cash. I guess this government has been successful so far in the state I'm talking about. That through their sort of how do I say it, like this kind of cash transfer program has been very popular and successful in the like to the mostly working class people there, right? So I mean, I just
how much cash are they planning to give?
1,500.
Yeah, 1,500. Yeah.
1,500 per year?
No,
one time.
1,500 monthly, I think.
Per month,
really?
Probably. Yeah, I think it's probably per month. Yeah,
1,500 per month.
Per month, right? Yeah, exactly. Okay. So it's 1,500 per month for any unemployed youth, basically. Right.
So any unemployed youth.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, yeah, I mean, there has been memes around like like everyone is applying for this anyway.
21 to 40, I think, from the age group of 21 to 40, you have to show that you are not. Okay. I mean, yeah, it's debatable, but
right.
Yeah, so I
You're
mean,
not,
like from
yeah.
I think you're not super aware of this, but like from your first impression of this kind of program versus like the Manrega kind of thing, where it's like more of an employment based programs, but the demand side will still be satisfied with this kind of programs, right?
That is right. Yeah, the demand side will be satisfied. This goes into like a wider debate about cash transfers and conditional or unconditional cash transfers, right? And
Yeah,
there is sort of evidence to show that cash transfers, can help with unconditional cash transfers can help to maintain a certain level of consumption demand. I think where NREGA was a sort of masterstroke is that they, on one hand, they said, this is a legally enforceable guarantee. So, which is one way in which it sort of breaks away from previous administrative programs. Second is that they defined the they defined or they defined a sort of a fairly broad area covering the different kinds of works that one would have to do. So you're not just giving away money, you're also using that money to create sort of rural farm
yeah.
assets, right? So if you're
Mhm.
doing community farming, if you're doing sort of ponds, if you're doing small canals, I mean, these are all ways in which you do land and water protection or regeneration work in rural areas. So they saw to it that if you're giving away money, that it was also resulting in something. Now it's very unfortunate that you know some people would say that it's just like you could just dig a hole, fill it up, dig a hole, fill it up, like that qualifies as work. But there were always safeguards within NREGA, the design of NREGA, to guard against that kind of waste, right? So that is why you had the social audits. That is why you had so there were certain administrative rules about what you should be working on. So, which I think is qualitatively different from a lot of the kind of cash schemes that have come to be very popular in India today. So there is, obviously there are the very popular ones in Maharashtra and Bihar and other states, right, where cash is being handed out, especially schemes announced just before elections. It seems like
Yeah.
that is exactly what has happened in West Bengal. Now, those are qualitatively different, right? So while on one hand, say, okay, money is being given to, let's say, women or young girls to go to school or go to high school or go to college, uh, but then those don't have these elements of like having to generate some sort of a productive asset, right? That Narega has. So in that sense, it is a very different scheme. Yeah,
Mhm.
but see, on the broader point of whether cash schemes are right or wrong. Again, I think it's tied in with the broader philosophy of how a government operates and what is being done, right? So on one hand, yes, that, as I said before, there is evidence that cash transfers help consumption. It helps people to a certain extent, right? But there is also evidence that there's also evidence to show, or you can imagine that um, that just this is a way of escaping accountability, right? You do cash transfers ahead of votes. You're a government that cannot create jobs. Like a
Mm.
cash transfer cannot be an excuse for not following a inclusive economic policy, right? So right now that is what it has become. That we can't give you jobs, so we will give you 1,000 rupees a month, right? We can't give you good university education, so we will, give you, I don't know, free data, 2 GB every day, right? So it's kind of become like that, which, as you can tell, is a very unproductive way of spending the money from the public exchequer.
I think here, I mean, just on the difference between probably if I draw parallels between a cash transfer. So I think in your Substack article, you mentioned that there has been extensive research beyond this MNREGA, right? I mean, the World Bank Rural, I think they have written some papers on it. And also there has been it has been not a just, I mean, it's not a one-shot policy that they have certainly come about. It's been a well researched, well thought through by economists and everyone, and other experts as well. And also, I think it was a series of events, right? In Maharashtra, I think there was this rural employment similar scheme due to the floods and other events, which so, but this bill, on the contrary, this bill seems to be a reactionary or some other intent. I don't know what you think about it. Is it like do they really needed to bring out this bill? I mean, what difference it actually makes? Is it a well-researched? Does it have a well-researched backing to bring this bill? That is.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not aware of what kind of evidence has been used here. The work that you are referring to that underpins NREGA goes back to the 1970s, as you said, and then Maharashtra was a pioneer state in doing a what is called an employment guarantee scheme, right, at that time. So it was just called the EGS, and then they have been piloting various versions of this, and these are early responses to those like drought in places like Vidarbha, etc. Right, when there were droughts, they sort of figured out that if they did cash for work programs, it was a way of helping people to still access food and essential supplies. And then they've sort of learned from that. Many NGOs have been involved in that kind of work. People like Aruna Roy and Nikhil Dey, they who are sort of instrumental behind the design of the NREGA. They drew lessons from that, and what they did was, this was, say, a program by the Maharashtra government. They matched a government-led program with what a citizenship or a rights-based program would look like, and then used that as a sort of an accountability mechanism, right? So that's how this was designed. So behind NREGA, yeah, you're right. So went like decades of learning, research evidence, sort of social consultations with people, thinking about how to do social accountability, so on and so forth. So this is a long period of time. Behind VBG Ramji, I mean, one can only say, is well, it's 21 years of NREGA, right? So that there have been lessons learned from that. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether the lessons that were learned were, were sort of used in the manner that they should have been used. The lesson learned was that, it is difficult to predict the budgetary allocation for NREGA. So let's come up with ways that we can set the budget, right? So the NREGA budget, for instance, hovers around sort of 75,000 crores per year. I mean, earlier on it was 45-50. Then later on it was, later on it has been around that amount. And during the COVID years, I think there was 1 year when it probably touched close to 90,000 crores, which just reflected the fact that when there was no work and everyone came back to the villages, they demanded NREGA, budget went up. Now, that sort of a uncertainty in the budget is within the spirit of NREGA, but it can be inconvenient for a government that is trying to sort of put a pin on a particular fiscal deficit number or a budget number, right? So they wanted, I suppose, they wanted to remove that uncertainty and make it a more sort of administratively defined program. Second, the second lesson they have learned is that they don't want states to do as they wish, in a sense. They want to, the discussion we had earlier, and I won't go into it again, that they wanted to control where the program works. As they, ostensibly, knowing this government, they probably want to have the levers to, let's say, scale up the program ahead of the elections in a place where they would like to scale it up, or to scale down the program in a place where they don't want the program to be. So, and so that is taking away power from the states, bringing back power to themselves, right? And then the third is, obviously, the government has gone big on technology, and they've made a big story about sort of corruption and wastage, etc., while ignoring all of the, or some of the self-correcting mechanisms of NREGA, right? So it's the self-correcting mechanisms of NREGA. By that I mean that it is not a program where people will just turn up and demand the money. Like, you have to do a day of hard labor to get the money. It is sort of the first sort of self-correcting mechanism. Second is you need to have strengthened the sort of the social audit systems within the villages if you had concerns that money is being wasted, etc. Instead, we've gone down the technology route, which I think many would support, and I support to a large extent. But if you make technology absolute, and if you say that, if say for an old person, if the biometrics don't match, then they can't either get work or they can't get paid, then in a country like India, you risk excluding a significant set of section of the population, right?
Yeah.
Of the rural, poor, needy population. So
Yeah.
they've kind of gone double down on all of these, and this is what has informed BBG Ramji.
As we have seen actually in the ongoing SIR procedure in West Bengal, because of there are silly differences among like the father's last name with the children's last name. If they do not match a little bit, I mean, they are being called, and they have to, I don't know, like old people, they have to be in the queue for like 3 hours to do this. I mean, all this kind of, again, like the burden is on you to prove you have the voting rights, right?
So a good friend of mine, and this you probably know this, many such instances. A good friend of mine was saying that his father's documents say Bandopadhyay, and his passport says Banerjee.
Exactly.
And just for, I mean, to for someone to say that is an anomaly in West Bengal is like you don't know history, geography, like you don't know anything, right? Like,
Yeah.
or you're doing it intentionally, right? You're doing it intentionally to cause mischief.
Yeah.
Uh,
Those
and
are done by the
uh,
institutions themselves. I mean, it is not, sometimes the input is theirs and they ask us to correct only.
yeah,
It's actually, I mean,
I mean, also
exactly.
they are using
that.
AI. They are using AI based system where AI data probably do
Doesn't
not know
know.
this
Yeah,
distinction, right? So they kind of
yeah.
and like coming to AI actually, that's also, I think, also in this act they mentioned that a lot about use of artificial intelligence for planning, audits, and fraud risk mitigations, right? So it's pretty much in the same directions, I guess. Fraud risk mitigation
Okay.
means they'll probably select by this who is eligible and so on, right?
Right.
So it's kind of in the
Okay.
same directions
Yeah, yeah.
probably.
Yeah,
Yeah.
again, yeah, I think again, you guys probably know more about the ways in which AI can be used here, but there are, I mean, we are at a, yeah, I mean, if you're using it to look at things like whether names match or whether the what you've written down in the muster roll when you've turned up to work matches some ration card, like we know that in India there are several you know issues with how names are recorded. Our own names can be written in three different ways. Like there's a lot of room for error. And then while one, I think there's nothing to be gained from resisting technology. We need to embrace technology and we need to adopt it. But we should watch out for times when technology is being used mischievously to deny, or heartlessly, right, to deny people rights. Like that, we're not at that stage yet where technology can just be applied blindly, without safeguards in it. So yeah.
Can be a final decision maker. That's the hardest part
Exactly, it shouldn't
probably.
be a
Yeah.
final. Yeah, AI cannot be the
Yeah.
final decision.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, what do you think of the opposition's role here? I mean, because they have brought the bill, that is fine, but in terms of the core ethos of this, I mean, if we leave aside many aspects, but the core ethos of right to work and the outcomes it has achieved, specifically, I was reading that I think around this MNREGA benefited around 50% women as well. I mean, most of the women workers, they were benefited a lot, and the basically a nationwide guarantee right to work.
Hmm.
Basically, it's a very fundamental ethos in a country like India, which is getting sort of distorted. So, how do you see the opposition's role here, and especially in the core principles, like? Uh, I mean, what was their role, or how did they actually defend, or because it has now been passed? So,
Yeah, yeah. So this is now a few months back, right? This happened in, I think, in December, isn't it? So, I mean, what can one say? The opposition it's been a sort of just been disappointing, right? Like in in so many different ways over the years. And one would have expected that a set of parties that were instrumental behind bringing the scheme in the first place, would have made far more noise and mobilized people on the ground, etc., to oppose this. Now, there are a couple of reasons why it's a bit difficult, which one should acknowledge, which is that, as I said, some of the changes that are being made are rather in the sort of details, right? In the sort of administrative details. The government is still able to say things like, oh, it is, now we have guaranteed 125 days. It used to be 100, it was 125 days. The common sort of person is not going to get exercised about the shift of the financial contribution from 90-10 to 60-40, because they rightly wouldn't necessarily see the problem with that.
Mhm.
So yes, it was incumbent upon the opposition parties to make more to sort of oppose this more concretely, to take the message out to the country. And I don't think they have quite been able to do that, right? So, and I felt quite strongly about that back then, which is why I mentioned it when I in my blog, right? But it's just, it's just not, it has just not happened. I mean, I don't know why. I mean, maybe it was too close to Christmas. I don't know
Yeah.
why. It's just
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
one thing, I mean, that's, I was just thinking as you were speaking that, like these nuances are hard to communicate, right? Like opposition parties, I mean,
Very.
their protest is as good as, if it becomes actually a meaningful one if there is a sufficient backing, popular backing. Like if you look into the farmers' protest, for example, or the NRC, the protest against NRC bill, right? See, they were very sort of large protests across the country, and there was a simple narrative to make, right? Like rightly you pointed out here, is the 60-40 is not a narrative that can be made by opposition to sort of just move the mass, right? That's always a hard thing. I mean, on the counterpoint, the government can say, okay, why are you protesting? I mean, they can convince the people that, I increased your from 100 to 125, 25% increase, so why are you protesting after all, right? So it's a tricky business. I mean, it's of course like the onus is on opposition to find a narrative, of course, and it's not easy. But that's what I was just thinking that it may not be that easy as well to
No,
make the
indeed.
case. Yeah.
Yeah, and this was and this was exactly, and this is a perfect sort of issue, right? I think, in fact, more noise has been made about some of the labor reforms that the government has pursued
Yeah.
than on this, right? Because on labor reforms, you have labor unions; they're fighting for labor rights, right? So this is while this has sort of become, I suppose, one of the problems with our politics, that on something like NREGA, like there is no, and I'm just thinking aloud right now, that maybe there is no constituency to be mobilized, right? It is not a particular religious constituency. It is not women. It is not just sort of youth of a certain kind, right? It is a sort of pretty broad based, and in India, you're talking about large numbers of people who are sort of around that poverty line, who need this kind of work. So one can see that it's difficult to kind of define that constituency and spread the message. At the same time, given the crores of people that it will affect, it's quite a pity that it is not right, that it has not become a bigger kind of deal than it should have been, and then it was.
Just
Yeah.
out of curiosity, do we have a good understanding of like how many people, like I'm focusing on rural working class people, right? So how many of, I guess a lot of them are employed in informal sectors, right? Like how many they had to depend on schemes like this for their livelihoods? Like, do you have any numbers for that?
Sure. So we are talking about roughly like around 5 crore households accessing NREGA, right? Annually. So 5 crore households, that is, times say 5 or times 4 as an average household size.
Sure.
So you're talking what, 20 crore households. sorry, 20 crore people, right? So 20 crore people. And remember, this is mostly in rural areas, right? So half of them are half of the workers are women. So yeah, so it's a and I think, what is the other number? The other is around 2 billion person days of work annually, right? So around 2 billion person days, which is what? Which is well, we can work that out, but it's 2 billion person days of work is what is generated, right? So as you and as you said, half are women, about 40% are scheduled caste or scheduled tribes. So if even if you look at this as 20 crore people benefiting from it, not 20 crore workers, mind you, because when I'm saying average household size, obviously includes children, etc. So 20 crore people benefiting from NREGA, you're talking about a large portion of the sort of rural poor that need this work, right? That need this income support. Yeah.
So that's a pretty large number. I mean, the
It
thing
is,
is
yeah.
that I mean, it's like even if the conservative estimate is like more than, I don't know, like 12%, 13% of the population, it's a huge number actually. So I mean, there is a case to make that, there should be certain amount of unhappiness. But again, like, because it's a new one, so maybe 3 years or 5 years down the line, we'll see that actually there is a certain impact. Like, if new numbers are coming in, like how many people are accessing the new scheme, maybe, right?
Yeah. New data.
So with this government, the other problem is
Data.
the total absence of data. Right?
Yeah.
So there is like a scenario where you can say we will never know the impact. Because when they're now, I think apparently they're doing the census survey sort of 5 years late, and 27 I think it'll come out. So it'll be very interesting to see what data comes out, and I really hope they don't try to suppress the data. But you probably know about the case of the National Sample Survey
I know.
organization, the NFHS, right, Family Health Survey, like where inconvenient reports were suppressed essentially by the government, right, when they did not like
Absolutely.
the data that came out on rural consumption. They just suppress the data, right? So with that sort of culture in place, and with our politics increasingly moving into a space where, people have delinked this sort of outcome and impact from their voting choices. I'm a little despondent about what that means for us.
Even for the 5 trillion economy, whatever the data points which are shown for Viksit Bharat, etc., I mean, they are not, even for GDP calculation, many economists have raised concern about the data accuracy. I mean, how the calculations are done are largely, I mean, it's not, it's largely different from one. So
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
On the
Exactly.
Viksit Bharat thing, I mean, I guess it's also probably mentioned in this new scheme that it is Viksit Bharat at 2047, I guess I mentioned, right? So is it like, I mean, again, like aligning everything to this, like even the AI summit was called like similar. Is it like, again, like say that, again, it's kind of we're coming back to the first question of right versus the duty, that your duty as a citizen to actually like contribute to this effort, this infrastructural development effort that we are aiming for, we are setting up, right? So it's kind of that it seems like that kind of emotions are at play, right?
No, indeed. I mean, it's I mean, the whole Viksit Bharat messaging, people have said this many times over, and I'm not a sort of a qualified macroeconomist to go into the data quality, but clearly there are issues with our GDP data. So that is one. Second is, we may be the third largest economy in terms of absolute numbers of GDP, even with the flawed numbers, let's say if not third, maybe fifth. But what does that mean to like really like a common person, and not just a common person in a village, but even a common person in Bangalore? Like what does that mean? It means nothing. And when you have a certain population size, like, and then you are bound to generate a large amount of output nationally, right? So we have the largest population in the world. We've surpassed China. So yeah, I mean, if there are there are 140 crore Indians or 1.4 billion Indians, if everyone generates, I don't know, $1,000 of output, like you get a massive number, right? So it's not, and then we know that the wealth inequality in India is has like crossed sort of all limits. So there is a heavy wealth inequality in the country, and if you take away again, I need to look at the numbers, but if you take away like the top 10% or even the top 1%, our per capita income drops significantly, right? So which just shows that yeah, it's just not, these things are all very hollow political messaging, political
But
rhetoric. Yeah.
But on the other hand,
Mm.
I could say that, like playing the devil's advocate, I could say that because you brought up China as well, right? So
Mm.
even of the lot of the issues that we are complaining about, like suppression of data, lack of even, I guess China is even like more extreme example where I don't know, like the data is probably like whatever data they produce, nobody trusts them in general. Yet they, I mean, it's kind of evident at this point that the overall development indexes are much better in China, right? So people can argue that if China could actually do this kind of suppression or whatever and still could develop, why India cannot develop?
Yeah, one can, again, of course, one can argue that. One can argue that, and I think China, again, China has followed a policy of, they've sort of, the government has encouraged production, subsidized production, and then been able to export widely to all over the world. I think China also took advantage. Well, so within China, there is a highly decentralized model where you have sort of
Governance model,
mayors
yeah.
at the city level, right? Empowered and in fact competing with each
Yeah,
other
they're competing.
and now that, yeah, and that competition, you can say, was kind of monitored, or let's say yeah, well, monitored is the word, right, for China, with sort of very close eyes from the Central Communist Party, and many sort of ways in which they are different. But they have succeeded in a kind of industrializing much more than the India has industrialized. They also were able to take advantage of a certain moment in history, I suppose, when expanding production to the extent they did, and taking advantage of their own, at that time, less developed status, they started exporting to everywhere in the world, right? And in a sense, kind of destroyed the manufacturing capacity of countries all over the world, including India, because by flooding markets with cheap goods. So that strategy has worked. I think there are limitations to that strategy, which we are seeing now. Apparently, there is massive oversupply of of real estate, of things like electric vehicles in China at the moment, and so it's a sort of a bubble that they'll need to manage. So yes, in India, I suppose you could follow a similar model. Maybe some of them try. I I just don't think we have that sort of clarity of vision,
Vision, yeah,
or
exactly.
even clarity of vision, or even that sense of, I think, national, in spite of the rhetoric, like a clear sense of the national pride, right? Like I think people are, political parties are trying to consolidate political power, and maybe the sort of the dream is that if we have a one party nation like China, we can then focus our energies on economic development, and maybe that is what the BJP and RSS believe, right?
Yeah, a lot of them are
So we'll see.
arguing
We'll wait
like
and
this.
watch.
Yeah, yeah,
We'll
yeah.
we'll
But I
we'll
think
wait
I
and
think
watch.
like
Yeah.
I mean I would say the same thing. I mean, like of course there is a modus operandi how a government functions. In that sense, you could say that there is a one party state with this like closely monitored structure, decentralization, all these things can work. But on the other hand, there is a base to it, right? So if you look back China's history, I mean, there was a initially ground up revolutionary forces where there are like at least the, let's say, just take two examples. Like Amartya Sen kept talking about the universal education and healthcare, right? He has this famous quote that no country in the world developed actually in the history without actually investing into human resource, in particular in education sector, public education and public healthcare, and these two things we are like we're degrading like fast, like even if we just my generation, I guess Shovik is probably much more younger than me, and then my child's generation, it's like there is virtually the public education is evaporating fast, like and so is the healthcare, and the private healthcare. I guess you probably know the entire sort of the private healthcare. I mean, I should not say some bad things, but it's like the overall business structure. It's like there is zero trust actually on this on the education, like private education and healthcare system. Somehow we are trying to say that we are, in one hand we are trying to follow the Chinese model of sort of the single party, and the other hand we are trying to follow completely private space for these fundamental aspects of humanity, basically education and healthcare, like becoming like US. So like picking the worst part of all these systems probably.
So that's exactly the problem, right? So we are, and then that is the problem, and I think it may be, yeah, we need a clear vision. We need to stick to a plan. I mean, we think that we can not do some of the basics, which is a lot of hard work, like like you said, sort of universal education, universal healthcare. So, and yes, I mean, Amar Toshin, Shobik, this is a discussion we need to have, right? So, it is a separate discussion we need to have. Is the yeah, without those basic human capabilities, you can't kind of do development. And
Progress. Yeah.
in a sense, I mean, in a sense, one can argue that if you give people those basic capabilities, then you can leave them to their own. To like,
Yeah.
then you can look at sort of benefiting from the spirit of human entrepreneurship and the
Yeah.
human desire for progress, right? To make a future for themselves. But here, quality is so poor, right? And then the other conversation we frequently have is the 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 mismatch in the amount of public investment and private investment in research and development in this country.
Yeah.
Right? So
As well.
China
As well. Yeah.
uh, did, I mean, the R&D investments in China, the patents that they are filing, like they are the highest, right? Like they file the highest number of patents in the world. I think even more than the United
Even
States
Yeah. I
for the
mean,
last many years.
all
all
the
the computers.
university rankings are also
Yeah,
China.
exactly. I was about
Yeah,
to come. In fact, the
yeah,
university ranking, I mean, there is a website called
yeah,
CS ranking. I mean, there
yeah.
is in any ranking, there would be some oppositions. But if you follow CS
Sure.
ranking, it's kind of a
Yeah,
one of the
exactly.
latest ones. And you see like the past 10 years, past 20 years, past 30 years, how Chinese universities, I think they are probably 6 universities top 20 or something right now. And if you just
Yeah.
mark AI, I think they will probably like, top top five. I think three of them will be Chinese universities. And in
Yeah.
my sort of field, a lot of people are actually, a lot of Chinese students, they typically they used to stay back in the West, right? So in the US, or find an academic job. Now
Hmm.
everyone is going back to China. I mean, not
Going back to
not
China.
let's not say everyone, but let's say
Yeah.
a large proportion. And
Yeah.
it's not because they are not getting a job in the US. It's because they have better offers in China. It's like,
Yeah.
not like, you don't have to make this kind of very sort of quote unquote nationalistic argument that you have to come back, otherwise they will be gaslighting you to say that why are you staying abroad or something. I mean, I know these things because I stayed abroad for a while, then I came back, so I know
Right.
this story entirely.
Right.
But on the other
Right.
hand, they create these opportunities right back home. And here, if you, I mean, I know that some professors in my field also, they come back and join IITs and ISCs and so on, but they had a price to pay actually. I mean, I
So
mean, they can be living we can be living in denial, but there is a price to pay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think a really important thing that people should consider is that we have now, so like, if you look at the last kind of 200 years of economic development around the world, there are there is no one sort of straitjacketed, foolproof model of growth, right? So countries that have prospered and survived are the countries that have adapted to the kind of the changing world, right? So as the equilibrium changes, as the context shifts, you have to change. So the Chinese model worked when it worked, and now they're coming up against some issues. So I guess they would hope that their investment in human capital, etc., will help them figure out what the next stage is of development and how they should counter that. If you look at the West, we know this now. The West we say the West is developed. Yes, the West is developed and has been developed since whatever the 1960s or before that. They're under severe strain in their economies. They are highly indebted. Many of the countries are highly indebted, right? Their politics is going right because there are lots of poor people. So it's not as if one and so
Yeah.
what India for India, my point is you can make mistakes with your economic model, right? Like so we can say that our sort of socialism led lefty sort of economic policy was a mistake, but it was a response to a particular time. I think what is
Yeah.
important is, are we able and willing to change? So I'm going to be sort of charitable to the current government even and say that they are following a certain sort of infrastructure-led, supply-driven economic model. They're sort of trying to do production. Fine, that's fine. My problem is that it always seems like that is a bit of a sideshow, right? So our sort of policy attention is so distracted by by matters of religion, by matters of, I don't know, invoking past glory. So what is I mean, everyone has a limited,
Yeah.
even if a person says that they are of non-biological nature and they don't need to sleep. I mean, everyone has limited broad, what do they call it, like mind space, right? So if you're spending so much time on all of that, you're not really working for the country's development. So yeah, that is my problem.
And so evident from the name of the scheme, right?
Oh my God, yeah. I mean that is just and which then happened, right? So then the half of the opposition's protest was about dropping the name of Mahatma Gandhi, and then I mean even they couldn't say much about whatever Ram, but but that is not really the point. I mean, Mahatma Gandhi
exactly. It's a distraction, actually.
He wouldn't have cared, like, if he was still around, right? So it's not the point. But yeah, exactly. So much time is spent coming up with, I'm sure, like, top babus are sitting in meetings saying, "Iske liye kya kaun sa naam rakha jaye," right? So it's like, oh, what is the?
They're spending more time in that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. They're spending. Yeah, so that's sort
Even
of
renaming of roads, cities. I mean,
yeah.
I
Actually,
think
this entire renaming, I mean, I think is completely useless exercise. Even if you, I mean, like, okay, there is this new Prayagraj kind of thing. Even before, even go back like 20, I don't know, 25 years, where they used to name Calcutta to Kolkata is also a bit, I think, pointless in general. I mean, all this like invoking these things. Also, like Park Street, for example, like Park Street, nobody calls it Mother Teresa.
is it?
Sharoni or whatever. Like everyone calls it Park Street because the
Park
name
Street,
it's it's a part of Kolkata. I mean, Kolkata was developed by British, but it's fundamentally I mean, we cannot like completely ignore British history. It's a part of our history.
It's a part of our history, right?
Exactly. There are bad things, but there are also like it's a complex thing. You have to like acknowledge. I mean, of course, that doesn't mean that we sort of bow to British or something, or the entire effort of our freedom movement. That was. I mean, nothing to like just undermine that, but it's just the thing is that it's a part of history. Just So what's the point of this?
Yeah. No, exactly. And it is the simple things. It is the simple things like you'll have, and then maybe these are amplified to people like us who are sort of opposed to this kind of discourse. You've got sort of politicians saying, don't buy stuff from Muslim shops, or don't tip a Muslim rickshawala. Like, again, like, if that is your politics, right? Like, that is not the road to development for any country, right? So then talking about China and saying we are so far behind.
Exactly.
Boss, we are
this kind of thing did not happen
we are
in
so
China,
far
for sure.
behind that it's not even right.
I mean, if you follow the Chinese, I mean, I do follow some Chinese bloggers and so on. I mean, they talk about like executions and policies in how, like, I mean, you can criticize them for their like lack of freedom of speech and treatment of like the minorities and so on. But, you talk about substance. I think that's the main problem. If you look into the media landscape even, right, it's horrible in India right now. I mean, 20 years ago, there was like a bunch of good channels, like a few good channels were there even 5 years ago. Now there is none, basically.
None.
Everyone is moved to independent media. governance.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think the thing that I have, and this is something that I have uh, say come to appreciate or learned in the last 10 years or so, having lived and worked abroad, is India's or Indian, our view of China is, yeah, I mean, we can say, we value our democracy and we wouldn't want to be in a country where there are restrictions on freedom of speech. Uh, we want that freedom of speech for ourselves. Similarly, other countries that have worked in a bit similar sort of views for some citizens. It, I guess, ultimately the point is, what is that sort of social contract between the state and their citizens, right? So if it works for Chinese, it works for Chinese. I mean, nobody's forcing me to go live in China if I don't pick that model. Similarly, I think the question in India is, what is the social contract between the Indian state and the Indian people, right? And then right now, there isn't a well-defined sort of social contract, right? So there are these sort of we touched on this earlier, these kind of like these random cash transfers that are announced during election time give the impression that the social contract is one where people are being told, you know, we are not responsible for like basic state functions like a good education, good health care, or for offering employment opportunities. And then therefore we need to kind of give people something to keep them distracted or keep them happy with leaders, right? The social contract that we have is increasingly personality cult uh, led. It is not a social contract really like that, but that's the sort of governance model we have right now. So and then just to bring it back to NREG, I think those who are sort of uh, really exercised about the NREGA being dismantled, and the dismantling has happened over time. As I said, the VBG Ramji is the culmination of about many years of weakening the scheme. The disappointment is that it is a departure from the a certain way in which the relationship between citizens and the government was defined through the NREGA, and the way in which it is being defined now in the current context, right? Where again it has become much more at the benevolence of the government giving something to people rather than people being key stakeholders and right holders, right, in the broad scheme of things. So that's yeah, and then I suppose we can talk about any sector. It broadly
Yeah,
fits into that.
that
It sort of
overall
fits into
model.
that
Yeah.
picture, isn't it? Exactly that overall model, and that's really the problem that we have. Yeah.
Also, I think in the name, I mean, I don't know, my personal view was that removing Mahatma Gandhi's name slightly feels bit disrespectful in terms, it's like a legacy. I mean, it's like something you are trying to rebalance based on your ideological viewpoint. But then, I mean, if something is logical, makes sense, why to really dissociate the name with that? I mean, that is also something, I don't know.
Sure, sure. As I mean, my view is the renaming was just a
Yeah.
ploy to distract and bait the opposition to, focus on the wrong things, right? Like when opposing the changes. There's really not much more to say about that, and it was unnecessary. It's an example. It's an illustration of how the priorities of this government are misplaced or are on the wrong places, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I think we are wrapping up probably, or
Yes, I think, yeah, we can wrap up. And maybe on a final note, we can see that how it shapes up this bill
yeah,
and the
exactly. Like,
rulings.
but like Shubhajit mentioned that lack of data is a huge problem. Like, even if you
Right.
have to evaluate these two things.
Yeah.
Uh,
So maybe I can say something about that quickly. So in terms of in terms of how public data is being used these days, like there is we will get data on Rega. So we will, or VBG, Ramji, we will get data on implementation because that is what is called administrative data. So the data will be collected on how many people are getting work, how much money is being sent from the center to the states. We will get that data, and that data will show a trend, I'm sure, of how the scheme has been performing, etc. What we are not getting and what we will not get here is the longer term sort of outcome data, right? So how is it changing the lives of people? And those are what are being collected through these other surveys like
NSSO and so on.
NSSO, exactly, the work that the NSSO does and the census work, etc. And in that we don't, we're not going to we're not going to get as frequently, but we will get administrative data. It will definitely show some trends. And if I may say finally, if the state governments are to respond to this sort of new scheme, I think what they should do is, instead of spending money themselves, like state governments, chief ministers announcing random cash transfer schemes, they should put money behind NREGA, because nothing stops them from supplementing the NREGA with, like, by funding it from their own coffers, right? And of course there are some constraints like GST revenue collection and the awards of the 16 Finance Commission, which we need to look at in detail. But states need to make it work. Like, it is not up to the center. The center is basically converting this into a more administrative scheme and reducing its obligations for how much it is willing to fund. But I think it's time for states to then take responsibility and then show that they can make something of this. And that's what I would hope to see.
Okay, I think that's a great note to end the conversation. Okay, thanks a lot for giving us time.
Thank you very much for having me.
Hopefully we talk again on some other topic someday.
Yeah.